slides to presenter.
Yeah.
Is there in the...
Yeah, I just couldn't do it. There. Is that good? Can you see?
Yep, all good.
Brilliant. Okay. So welcome everybody. We'll be getting started in the next couple of minutes, just waiting for a few more people to join, and we'll be with you very shortly. Karen, I think we're ready to start when you are.
Cool. Kia ora koutou, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome wherever in the world you're joining us here today. I'm Karen from Generations Connect New Zealand, and I'm really looking forward to chairing today's webinar as part of the Global Intergenerational Week. This session is a collaboration between organisations from the Asia Pacific region, Generations Connect New Zealand, the Australian Institute of Intergenerational Practice in Australia, the GenLab Collective from Singapore, and the Mighty Oaks Foundation from Hong Kong. Together, we're all really excited to bring you this conversation around creating intergenerational spaces and communities where people of all ages can connect, share and thrive together. We've got a fantastic group of speakers joining us today, each bringing their own unique perspectives and experiences to this conversation. Please feel free to add any questions in our Q&A box throughout the presentations. We are hoping at the end we will have some time to answer those and for you to be able to share any comments or reflections you have on what you've heard today. Anyway, to get us started, I'd like to welcome back Marlene from the World Health Organization as our first guest speaker. Last year, Marlene shared with us the importance of intergenerational connections in addressing ageism, and we're excited to hear her thoughts again today. So Marlene, over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and hello everybody, and thank you for your kind invitation to be here. And firstly, happy Global Intergenerational Week. And may I begin by congratulating each of you on all your work. Your work is critically important, timely, and increasingly understood as being central to building a future and a world that is inclusive of all ages. So again, thank you for your work. Why am I here? Well, yes, I'm from the Global Campaign to Combat Ageism. And as I mentioned last year, the first UN report on ageism told us about the prevalence and impacts of ageism at the global level. And just to remind you, globally, 1 in 2 people are ageist against older people. And in Europe, the only part of the world where we have the data, 1 in 3 report experiencing ageism. And this includes everything from being insulted, abused, excluded, or denied services because of their age. But critically, the report gave us the evidence about what works to reduce ageism and its impacts. Essentially 3 strategies: policies and laws, education, and intergenerational work. These 3 strategies are proven and powerful ways to combat ageism. And that's why the WHO's Global Campaign to Combat Ageism is so proud to be involved and to continue to promote intergenerational initiatives globally to build a world for all ages. And I know this is a vision many of us share. And some of you may be aware that last year I spoke about our publication, Connecting Generations, which is a practical step-by-step guide to doing intergenerational work for those who are well-versed, but also those who are new to this work. It's got case studies, principles, practices, activities, tips, a treasure trove. You'll find it at #aworldforallages.org, and I have no doubt that you will find it a very useful, practical publication. And please let your colleagues know about it, because it's an important document, and we hope that it is useful. But today I really want to broaden out a bit and give you a view of what is happening globally and with international institutions such as the WHO with regard to intergenerational practice. For example, last year in September, we held a Summit of the Future side event on intergenerational solidarity, building a future for all ages. Intergenerational solidarity was a cornerstone of the Summit of the Future, and it included UN agencies, governments, civil society organisations from all around the world. That event is being followed up this year in November with the second World Social Summit for Social Development, and this will build on the discussions at the Summit of the Future on intergenerational solidarity. It's a very strong theme at the global level in international institutions. Another very significant development is that promoting intergenerational solidarity on the one hand and combating ageism and eradicating age discrimination are increasingly being partnered as strategies to realise this society for all ages. For example, these are the first two action points of a landmark document, a UN report called Intergenerational Relations, Creating a World for All Ages so that no one is left behind. And that report was authored by the UN's 5 regional commissions that are part of the Economic and Social Council of the UN. That's Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia and the Pacific, Western Asia and Europe. So these are significant conversations, and we have a key moment. And as I've tried to demonstrate, intergenerational work is increasingly a focus at the global level, but we want it to be a very explicit part of the deliberations of building a world for all ages. So we're encouraging member states to build intergenerational work into their agendas and priorities, because we all know about the great benefits intergenerational work brings to health, connection, understanding, and so on. But we also want people to use it as an approach, as an enabler to address so many of the issues we're all faced with, like generational divides, climate change, digital inclusion, and so on. Because an intergenerational approach is critically important for those of us who are young now, those of us who are old now, for those of us who will be older, for those not yet born, and into the future. So this is a really critically important approach. Another perspective that the WHO brings is that the unit within which the global campaign to combat ageism sits supports the decade of healthy ageing. And that's all the good stuff about healthy ageing, ageism, long-term care, integrated care, but also age-friendly cities and communities. And there are 1,700 of them. And as we know, age-friendly initiatives focus on where we live, how we live, access and inclusion, and so on. Very much in keeping with today's theme of intergenerational spaces and communities. So the synergies between all of these functions and perspectives is immense. And if you haven't already done so, please do visit the Decade of Healthy Aging platform. There are lots of good resources there, and you may wish to also contribute your initiative. The other area which sits in this team is the Commission on Social Isolation, and that's all about gathering the evidence base and strategies to build social connections, reduce loneliness. I am all about joining the dots between these great movements, and we can weave a thread through where we live, how we connect, and ageing, which promotes social cohesion, improves health outcomes, enhances community resilience, and builds a world for all ages. One last thing I want to leave you with. I'm delighted to let you know that on Monday, the WHO will launch an ageism scale. This easy-to-use and highly flexible tool can be used alongside your initiative to measure the impact that your intergenerational program has had on ageist stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Up till now, there has been no existing measure that could capture all the 3 dimensions of ageism: stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination at all three levels: individual, interpersonal, and institution. And that's what this scale is all about. It's been validated and tested in many countries under many, many different conditions. And the goal of the scale, because we all know evidence matters, is to provide accurate and comparable measures of ageism, better illuminate its causes and consequences, and to inform policies and interventions. And after Monday, you'll find it at hashtag A World for All Ages on the website, and I do commend it to you. So on that note, thank you again for the opportunity. Congratulations on your work and happy Global Intergenerational Week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marlene. It's great to know that it's a global, has been identified as a global, I suppose, way of addressing lots of different issues, and us being a part of it is really nice moving forward. So thank you so much for that. Next, I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker, Hong Kai, a representative from Singapore. Hong Kai will be sharing insights on creating safe intergenerational spaces, which is an essential aspect of fostering inclusive and supportive communities. So Hong Kai, I'll pass it on to you now. Hong
Hello,
Kai.
everyone. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you just want to turn
Hello.
your
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Now it's 10 a.m. in Singapore. So today I'll be presenting on behalf of GenLab Collective. I'll be presenting on this topic: creating intergenerational spaces and communities. Successes, challenges, and lessons learned. Next slide, please. So this is what I'll be covering. I'll start by briefly unpacking what I understand of the topic, as well as providing followed by providing the context in Singapore about the intergenerational landscape, before briefly going through one of the flagship activities that GenLab has done, which is GenDate, before and wrapping up with a final slide with a brief summary. Next slide. So for myself, this topic is interesting because I've briefly done research before as a student in geography and sociology. So the question I ask myself is, what's the relationship between spaces and communities? Moreover, it's interesting that there was this spaces was put before communities. Instead of creating communities and spaces, it's creating spaces and communities. So even if we don't, as in, I don't think people would think too deeply into that. But for me, my sense is that actually, for there to be communities, you need to have spaces first. So communities, people inhabit spaces, and when people come together, that's when we have communities. So the first question that I was thinking about is, how do we help to animate a space? How do we give life to a space? So the idea of invitation, bringing people together to do things, or just being there physically, that's the idea of engagement. So the second question, with people or users coming to with people coming together, what's the nature of interdependence amongst the different users that organizations like ourselves wish to foster? Lastly, over time, as people come together to use the space regularly, how does that shape the culture that forms organically, thereby transforming a space into a place with multiple belongings, where people are familiar with each other, familiar with the functions of the space? So in creating intergenerational spaces, I guess the focus would eventually lead us to consider about the types of culture that would be shaped and fostered over time when enough people come to use it. Next slide. So When it comes to the first question that I thought about, how do we animate a space? The design and engagement is very important. So in terms of what does the space allow the user to do, the affordances, how does the space look like, the aesthetic, and in terms of the relationships that are built, does it engender trust? So the forms as well as the potential of perceived function of a particular space is very important. Next, for the second question, what's the nature of interdependence? So bringing together, whether or not in a particular space, there are different amenities that are co-located together. In Singapore, there's such a thing in our public housing. We have playgrounds just located at the bottom of our flat. So then under the void deck or the public space, on the ground floor of our public housing, there are other shops such as food stores, childcare centers. So in putting together these amenities, very often you have residents coming together in their free time and bumping into each other. So this idea of co-presence, when people are attracted to different amenities for their different functions, that's something important to consider. So you would think whether or not over time, will there be shared emotional attachment to this particular space? Or is it something that is very fleeting, whereby only superficial relationships are formed? So lastly, in relation to the types of kind of culture that is shaped based on the relationships of interdependence, I'll be interested in looking at social cohesion, whether cohesive communities with multiple belongings and various shared interests, can they accommodate each other and live harmoniously within that neighborhood? So just for context, playgrounds in Singapore have changed over the years in terms of how we think about it and how it has been designed to meet multi-generations. So in the past, it was more of top-down. Right now, our government is trying to get more residents in the neighborhood involved in designing a playground with a thematic focus. For instance, the neighborhood may have hosted a military camp nearby. So the neighborhood has a military history. Sorry, is everything okay?
Sorry, just changing the view to presenter view. Keep going.
Okay. So to celebrate the history of the neighborhood, we have playgrounds that are designed, like a military trucks, for instance. So it's something interesting to see how design can actually shape the place identity of the neighborhood and how it gets people interested in participating and using the amenities that are offered. So next slide. Okay, so before I talk about this slide, so those three things that I talked about, design and engagement, being together as well as social cohesion will be the parameters of what I see as successes and challenges in creating intergenerational spaces, which I'll cover later on. So on to Singapore's intergenerational landscape. Right now, in Singapore, the government is taking a coordinated approach that currently looks at aging in place, and across places to build strong families, vibrant neighborhoods, to empower older adults with opportunities to learn, participate, and contribute. So this Singapore, it's mostly agencies-led and it's partnership-driven. So we have an agency of integrated care that looks at social care for the older adults. So we have these centers called active aging centers in Singapore, where the centers organize day activities for older residents to come together, to bond, to engage in activities that are curated, that with the aim of improving their social connectedness and health. So Singapore is embarking on a nationwide project now, which is Healthy SG, whereby we want to get residents, Singaporean citizens, to be more involved, to be more aware of their own health. So this idea of moving upstream to preventive care, by looking at this thing called social prescription. So it's not just physical health, but it's also about one's social health. The idea of how we remain connected to our fellow citizens or residents, neighbors in the neighborhood. Then there's also this, so we are also getting increasingly paying more attention to how we can build inclusive communities, starting with the accessibility of infrastructure and subsequently with a view towards improving accessibilities for programs and services. For instance, having a library that is welcoming of persons with disabilities of all ages. So how do we allow them to borrow books or even read in our public libraries? Lastly, this idea of lifelong learning, where there is another national movement, Skills Future, where different ministries are working together to provide opportunities for older adults after their retirement to reskill and seek re-employment opportunities. Of course, it need not just be looking at re-employment opportunities. It could be for hobbies or other things that may not necessarily lead to economic productivity, but are still considered ways for the older adults to contribute to their community. So you can see, I put in the budget to show you how much resources the government is putting into healthcare, social care, national development, as well as education. So this is just a structural view of what's happening in Singapore, a zoom out view. Okay, moving on.
Sorry to interrupt, Hong Kai. If you could give us one last thought, that would be great because time is just about up.
Okay, GenLab, our mission in GenLab is really to facilitate collaboration and co-creation. So given that Singapore, it's always agencies-led and there's a partnership-driven focus, what we hope to do is to bring different partners together to make a difference through our Connect framework, whereby the focus is really on empowering older adults and the younger generation to work together to form synergies and cultivate trust through healthy modes of engagement centered on listening and co-participation. And our priority is really to bridge potential perceived generational differences and seeing how diverse perspectives can be interrelated. For example, the topic of climate change and mental health. Could there be certain relationships that we talked about? Moving on. So, moving on. Okay, in the interest of time, I will just briefly talk through my final slide. So Gen Date is one of our public bridging event where we bring different generations, two generations together. So from the activities that we have organized, we realized that creating intergenerational spaces requires very intentional programming. And often not, what is effective is creating a shared context for participants across age groups, be able to get them to understand and relate to the space where our activities are organized. But this in turn helps to foster familiarity and belonging for them in how they relate to the purpose of the activities that we have designed. Thirdly, we also are considering how to, we think that it's important to ensure that the spaces engender a sense of safety, not just physical safety, but also emotional safety. Holding a safe space for the participants to get them to remain open in learning from one another as they go through the programs together. Lastly, because multiple generations, participants of different generations come to participate at different life stages. So they might have their own reason or motivations for attending a particular program in an intergenerational space. What's most important is to get them to align their expectations at the start so that as we get them to engage one another, there are common landing points for them to interact and stay curious about one another's lived experiences. Okay, so that's all I have to share on behalf of GenLab Collective. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hong Kai. It's wonderful to hear different countries' perspectives and just about the relationship between spaces and communities and how you can create that. So thank you for your time. Next, I'd like to introduce our New Zealand representatives, Animoa and Raywin, and they'll be sharing their work around co-designing an intergenerational learning centre, a project focused on creating a collaborative space that brings together people of all generations. So Animoa and Raywin, take it away.
Well, greetings everyone. I will begin with a blessing. So, aio ki te rangi, aio ki te whenua, aio ki ngā tangata katoa. Let peace reign in the heavens and on the earth and amongst all of us. So, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou katoa, ngā mihi i o iwi take, i o mokopuna, i o tangata i te kaupapa nei. So warm greetings to all of you. I greeted all of those who have walked on the land before you in the place where you join this seminar. I also greeted the generations that will come after us, and a greeting to you all who are present here at this webinar. So ko waio, who am I? Ko Tapawai o Unuku te maunga. Tapawai o Unuku is my mountain. Ko Wairo te awa, the Wairo is my river. Ko Rangatane o Wairo is my tribe. Ko Animoa Gould is my name, Animoa Gould. Now I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Raywin, to introduce herself too.
Kia ora, Animoa. Thank you so much. And like Animoa, I'm going to introduce myself in terms of where I come from here in this beautiful country of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Ko Tauhara toku maunga, so Tauhara is the mountain that I come from. Ko Waikato toku awa, that's the river I come from. Ko Tauponui Atia Te Moana, that is my sea, even though we know it's a lake. Ko Raywin Jacobs toku ingoa, ko Ngāti Tuwhare tō toku iwi, nō Taupo aho. My whānau come from Taupo, which is in the middle of the North Island. So just thanks a lot for us being able to present here around kind of what we're learning as we go through this design piece for the Intergenerational Learning Centre. So I think first of all, what I thought I'd talk about is actually just a little bit of the history behind actually who Vision West is, before we delve a little bit deeper into what the work that we're doing on our Intergenerational Learning Centre. So Vision West, waka Whakakitenga is a large social service provider based out in West Auckland. Our vision there is kia Tumanaka Kotria, or Building Hope Together. We're a faith-led organisation that has been founded through the Glen Eden Baptist Church, and today the church and Vision West continue to work together in the community. We coexist on our site out in West Auckland. Vision West has grown up. We're about 35 years old now, so we're kind of not a junior in the social services landscape in Auckland anymore. And we actually employ over 1,800 staff. We provide a range of services to our communities in Auckland, in the Bay of Plenty, in Hamilton and in Christchurch, but primarily the main range of our services are based from our West Auckland site, where we provide home health care, housing, youth support, counselling, budget advice and financial mentoring, whānau support and food support through our food bank and our social supermarket. Can we turn the slide, please? So this is our village, and we do call it a village, but particularly the left-hand side is kind of what we are looking to develop over the next 5 years. So back in 2012, which is, like we're talking 13 years ago, the trust had this vision to actually remodel our buildings. So actually, if we go to our buildings, they're now like, sometimes our services are delivered from garden sheds, some of them in garages. That's how we operate still today. So it's definitely a little bit challenging when you want to provide support to our families in need when your buildings are of a pretty poor quality. Back in 2012, we had a number of workshops. We talked to staff, we talked to whānau, we talked to architects. Back there, we weren't talking about housing specifically for elderly. We knew that we had an early childhood education centre that was past its use by date. In fact, it was a house that was never built to be an early childhood education centre. And we know that there's been real challenges with that. So that was always on the cards, that we would look to redevelop that site. Of course, when we started thinking about redeveloping our site, we didn't know that COVID was going to come knocking on our door. And then 2 years ago, we had some devastating floods out in West Auckland. So, the time up until probably last year hadn't been right for us to look at how we redevelop this whole site. As I said, like our early childhood education centre needed serious work, as did every other building on that site. So what we've also, as we started to look at this development, we also received really strong signals from our families and from our community that actually there was another crisis that we hadn't actually got our heads around, and that was housing for our elderly community. Like we had a housing crisis in New Zealand, but it was actually really starting to impact on our elderly families, particularly our older single people, older people that actually didn't own their own homes, older people that couldn't afford to rent because the market rentals were so high. So we have this other looming crisis that's racing down towards us, which is, thinking about what Marlene has said. It's actually, like the needs of our elderly people are just becoming so much more important. So, like all of a sudden it's like, okay, what are we going to do? Yeah, we're in housing, but actually we've got this housing need for older group that we have actually never catered for before. So, they had their needs of aging people are so much different from the housing needs of families. A lot of them are on their own now, and also looking at kind of how do you build facilities or homes that are more suited for the elderly people, whether it's doorways, heights, showers, ramps, all of those things that we really need to start getting our head around. But also, and I've heard this mentioned already today, is around the social wellbeing needs of our elderly community. It's thinking actually what do we need to do there. If we can go to the third slide there, please. So we kind of decide, like we have this, our Village of Hope, Kainga o te Tumanako, and I actually stole some words from Marlene here, and she talked about building a world for all ages. So this is us building our village for all ages. We've got everything from our little children that might be in Eden Cottage to our children that might be actually going to our local primary school, our families that need help, but also the elderly members of our community or our people with disabilities that we need to also look at supporting. So like we talk about a village for all ages, but I love the terminology building a world for all ages and not just being so singular in our focus. We're building, we've started doing some of our development. We're building apartments at the moment. There are 24 apartments, and the bottom floor of those apartments have been designed for older whānau as well as for people with disabilities. So they're being built with that sector particularly in mind. We're looking at what our community hub will look like in the future, so that actually all the people that live in our village will be able to actually have services or access services in our village. And then the third stage, which we're exploring at the moment, is what would an intergenerational learning centre at Vision West look like. So when we decided to look at this, because it is a big design piece of work that we're currently undertaking, we knew that we needed to engage external advice. We needed someone else to guide us through what best practice looks like, and look at research locally and internationally and what some of the challenges may be. I'm just going to hand that over to Annie Moore now, because I'm actually just a little bit mindful that I'm going to use up some of her time. So Annie Moore, I'm going to let you talk about the next phase.
Right, if we go to the next slide. So we decided that the key challenge that we were trying to ask around an intergenerational learning centre was how might we create opportunities through an intergenerational learning centre, which includes senior housing and early childhood education services for older people and tamariki, which is a Māori word for children, to learn, live and connect and flourish in their daily lives. So the next slide. We decided that we didn't want to just design something for people. We wanted to do as much co-designing as we could. And so you'll see in some of these pictures, we gathered together some of the older members of the church and the community, some of the parents of those who have children in the early childhood centre, some of the staff from Vision West to all come together and go on a journey of listening and discovering. So if we go to the next slide, just like Hong Kong, the earlier presenter, we have 4 aspects to our part thing as well. So the first step was to actually just do some of the foundational work to prepare for this learning journey together. The second part was to be really going out and doing some listening and engaging in different ways. Once we'd done a lot of listening, then this group would work through some of the design, what that might mean for it in person and actuality, and then doing some testing of those with the community as well. And we might do a bit of circulating around those 3 steps. So this is the co-design approach we took. And if we go to the next slide, the co-designing was meant to be fun. So we did some creative activities where we dreamed and we tried to imagine some different ways in which housing might look. And we brought together the different people. We're actioning the Early Childhood Centre to give us lots of ideas. If we go to the next slide, one of the things is the idea was probably sparked by some intergenerational learning centres in Europe. But then when we came to actually look at it, we realised that the Indigenous community of which Raewyn and I are part of have actually been doing intergenerational learning for years and years and years. And really in New Zealand, there's been a regeneration of the culture and the language since 1975. And one of the key parts of that was to bring early childhood learning back onto what we call a marae, and you can see that picture there. That is the central meeting place for our culture. And then around that space, that's my actual marae there, around that space, there is also various education institutions as well as elderly housing. That is all centred around the community there. So we really wanted to draw wisdom from the Indigenous community to find out what we could learn. And there were 3 things we probably really sort of understood. When we heard from some of the older ones who live on the marae, they really wanted to impress how important it was that there is a spiritual dimension to what happens. And the spiritual dimension is often left out of a Western development mindset. The second thing was that, as you saw, Raewyn and I introduced ourselves by a connection to a mountain and a river. And in the Māori world, the way the community exists in the land is very important. And so that's going to be interesting to sort of see how that plays out in the project that we're doing. And the third thing is that they're really clear that the reason why the community works is because it's focused around the regeneration and the life of the culture and the community. So rather than just designing a space for people, we need to challenge ourselves to think, how will this community function with elderly and children, young children existing in a building, but how does that building exist in a community? What is the role that these older people might have in the community, in the village of hope? These are lots of questions that we've got, but I'm going to pass back to Raewyn to see if there's any other insights that she wants to share, and then I will finish off with a blessing.
Thanks, Animo. I suppose all we actually just looking forward to sharing our learnings. We're nearly at the final stage of this. We've got what we call a walkthrough to share our ideas back to our community, our whānau, our groups next week. And if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat, and we'd love to answer them once we're all finished. So thank you. Thanks, Karen. And Animo, I think you want to just close with a nice little karakia for us.
Yes, I'll just finish with a blessing. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou āriki ai hukraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Let love and grace and connection join us all, and for us to be at peace. Thanks for your time. Then passing back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Animo and Raewyn, and I'm super excited for your development and being involved in any way I can moving forward, because it's just in my back garden, literally. So it's a very exciting time here in New Zealand for those sort of things to be starting to come to fruition. Anyway, moving on, we have our second guest speaker, Savannah, who is an international housing researcher and Churchill fellow. Although Savannah isn't able to join us live today, we're fortunate to have her presentation to share with you. Savannah's work focuses on intergenerational housing, and we're looking forward to hearing her insights on this topic. So let's hear from Savannah now. We can't hear her, Xanthi. All right, we'll just wait for the Xanthi to get the presentation back up again. Just remember, yes, as Animo and that said, please put any questions or comments you have in the question and Q&A or chat, and we can get to those later on. Just to have a discussion at the end would be really beneficial, I think, for everybody.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to share emerging insights from my project exploring intergenerational communal housing models. I welcome anyone watching to connect with me after. My email is savofficial1@gmail.com, and my website, where you can subscribe to receive my final output, is thinkitforward.net. So I'm Savannah Fishel. I'm a service designer for a non-profit in the UK, and I've got a background in health policy and politics. On a personal level, I've been lucky enough that intergenerational friendships have shaped my life, and I know that this is increasingly rare. I believe that how we live together across generations has profound implications for our collective well-being. So I began working with the Cares family, which is a brilliant organisation focused on intergenerational friendships that's sadly closed. Through a service design project, I explored barriers, drivers, and benefits of intergenerational friendship, and I created tools like Chatter Matters, an inclusive conversation deck for all ages. On my website, there's a storybook that kind of charts the whole journey, but I'm going to move on for now because hi everyone. I know that this is increasingly rare. I believe that how we live together across generations has profound implications for our collective well-being. So I began working with the Cares family, which is a brilliant organisation focused on intergenerational friendships that's sadly closed. Through a service design project, I explored barriers, drivers, benefits of intergenerational friendship, and I created tools like Chatter Matters, an inclusive conversation deck for all ages. On my website, there's a storybook that kind of charts the whole journey, but I'm going to move on for now because today I'm focusing on my Churchill Fellowship. I visited 53 intergenerational communal living models in Australia and the US, ranging from co-housing to tiny home villages, urban and rural cooperatives. I excluded short-term or family-only households. Mostly, I visited communities that were self-governed, but I did include some that were, for example, supported independent housing blocks, as long as they were intentionally focusing on building community and intergenerational relationships. Wording is evolving in the communal housing space, and in my final output, which will be published in summer, I will include all my working definitions. Before diving in, I also just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in both Australia and the US, recognising the enduring impacts of colonisation and the fact that these lands were never ceded. I also want to acknowledge that I'm not an expert. The real experts on communal living are those who are living in these communities, and I'm going to aim to centre their perspectives. So I see intergenerational living as a really exciting, practical response to some of the most complex challenges that we face today around housing, health, and loneliness, for instance. Communities built with intentional everyday interaction across ages can increase people's social and support networks, reduce polarisation, improve well-being, relieve pressure on public services, all whilst creating more eco-friendly living environments. Both the US and Australia, the countries I chose to do my research in, like the UK, are highly individualistic countries. They're facing chronic loneliness, insecure housing, political polarisation and disconnection. And I've been really interested in how pioneering communal living models can survive in a context like that. Australia, in particular, build and live in the biggest homes in the world. So your expectations around space and separation is often deeply embedded. Despite that kind of dominant aspiration of detached home ownership, the legacy of intentional communities, the movement from the 60s and 70s does linger in Australia. Communities like Crystal Waters Eco Village in Queensland or Mora Mora, a rural co-op in Victoria, both of which I visited, have emerged out of countercultural ideals, seeking alternatives to mainstream capitalism. Today, though, I'm going to share with you some urban examples. But before those case studies, why communal living? Well, I've synthesized 6 key benefits that have emerged through my visits. First, top right there, sharing the load. So, for example, collaboration during crises, chore sharing, childcare. So, as one cooperative resident told me, as a single dad, if I get home late from work, there's always people here. It's like my daughter has lots of aunts and uncles. People watch out for each other. So the second benefit after sharing the load is efficient and sustainable consumption. This is about reducing waste, sharing resources, etc. Third, health, well-being, personal growth, social stimulation, cognitive engagement, skill sharing. The fourth, affordability and convenience through, for example, collective purchasing, shared amenities, and in some cases, more compact living arrangements. Although some models can be expensive or exclusive, I have intentionally focused, where possible, on communities that do have affordability mechanisms built in, and I can go into more detail in my output. So the fifth benefit, cultural enrichment and resilience. For example, empathy, advice, crossing generational silos. And finally, up the top there, social connection. So this is about reducing isolation, a sense of belonging, and opportunities for meaningful contribution. These benefits here are focusing on residents. What are they getting out of it? But actually, I've seen the benefits ripple outwards to community. So from alleviating burdens on public services to creating community assets. And I have an article coming out on the benefits for broader community on this in May. But I want to move on into some case studies before I dive into what helps these communities thrive and work in practice. So the first one, Murundaka, is a long-term all-renter cooperative, so quite unique. All residents here serve as shareholders, and rent is around 25% of people's gross weekly income. Residents are deeply embedded in their community. They host events, they run workshops, they catalyse lots of ecological projects. Children play together, parents share lifts to school. One single mother who I spent some time with, who emigrated from Japan to Australia, highlighted the benefits of her son growing up around other young people and having older role models as well, saying that it made her son's life richer. So that's Murundaka. I'm going through these quite quickly just because I've only got 10 minutes. This is Urban Coop. It's a co-housing apartment block with multi-generational events, shared meals paid for by their own internal currency, and self-governance in a very urban space. It's part of Nightingale Village, which is 6 neighbouring buildings designed with social, environmental and financial focuses. So that's Urban Coop, the co-housing apartment block. And the third one I'm going to share with you is Christie Walk. This is a compact, biodiverse development in central Adelaide. So also very urban, residents aged 2 to 85. Residents have lived out their full lives here with powerful instances of mutual aid and neighbourly care around end of life. With 1,000 visitors a year, this community is very dedicated to education and community interaction. So those were 3 really brief case studies. What is it that helps intergenerational communities like these thrive? I have summarized some of my learnings here on the slide. So if we start at the beginning, physical foundation. So the built environment needs to support aging in place. So it needs to consider accessibility, transition as needs change, multi-purpose spaces allowing for a range of activities, intentional design facilitating both connection and privacy, green space, and things like shared laundry and mail, really important for spontaneous interaction. Then you move into that social infrastructure, so rhythms and rituals, for instance, around food, as well as co-developed processes and agreements, for example, around conflict, which I write a lot about in my blog. And then if we move up to the top one, belonging and purpose. So this is about skill sharing, acknowledgement and celebration rituals, embracing changing dynamics as people come and go. So clearly, having a mix of generations is absolutely critical for the success of these types of models. At one co-housing community, an 84-year-old resident said to me, "If I lived in a senior community, it'd drive me crazy. No matter how crazy it gets here, having kids around is enlivening and invigorating." And I've seen this play out in practice time and time again. So I need to finish there, but I'm just going to leave you with some really big questions about life that I think these communities invite us to consider. How do we want to live and age? Why are so many of us so dissatisfied with current housing arrangements and lack of social connection? And how can we undo manufactured divides around aging and reconnect and support one another? There's no one answer, but there is a rich spectrum of ways that we could live differently and make meaningful connection across ages beyond nuclear family part of everyday life. I think reimagining how we live together is absolutely necessary for making us more resilient for the myriad challenges that we're facing as a society. I know this has been really quick, but all the diagrams, more case studies, etc., will be in my final output in more detail. On the screen is my email and my website, as well as an interview for a podcast I recently did with Adelaide Chronicles. I'm also going to be on ABC in Australia on the Life Matters show at 9 a.m. on the 30th of April, so feel free to tune in there. I'd love to stay in touch. Thank you so much for your attention.
Right, well, that was great to hear from Savannah, even though she couldn't be here, and she definitely made me think of just how we plan and move forward, especially in that housing space. So we'll look out for her research when it comes out. But next we'll hear from Barbara and Jessica from Australia. They co-created a fully integrated intergenerational program, bringing together different generations in a shared learning and living environment. So time for you, Barbara and Jessica.
Thank you.
I
So
might
much.
just, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Sorry, I was just
Barbie's
going to say,
to.
Oh, right, start again. Hello, can I just say thank you for inviting us? I have a very croaky voice at the moment, so I'm actually going to hand over to Jessica to do the presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions later.
Thank you. Now, it is absolutely a privilege to be here and extraordinary to hear from all the other practitioners and researchers so far today. It's a tough act to follow, I'll tell you that. Some absolutely amazing work going on, and thank you so much to those who have already shared and will be doing so later today. We're really proud to just share a little bit from a practical perspective about our story. Barb and I are both early childhood educators and leaders in that field, so we don't have an academic background. We're on the ground, quite literally. With the children. So if we could pop to the next slide, please. We are representing Echoes Montessori, which is an early learning and care setting in Adelaide, South Australia. We have children from the age of 6 months all the way through to school age, and they are in the same intergenerational village as the Encore apartments for independent retirement living. So within that age cohort, we've got residents from 65 all the way up to 93 and counting. So that we've got children from 6 months interacting with our grand friends all the way up to 93 years. It's pretty extraordinary. As mentioned, it's completely integrated. We have a complete holistic view of that community. So in addition to our classroom being a sort of set space where the grand friends are welcome, and the apartments upstairs obviously being a private living space, but where children can sometimes visit when they're invited or when they're doing little deliveries, we also have beautiful communal spaces that have been very deliberately built into that design. So I'm hoping technology is going to treat us well, and that we'll be able to play this little embedded video here to just give you a glimpse into what Echoes and Encore look like.
At Echoes Montessori, we believe that learning is not limited to childhood, but a lifelong journey. Our innovative intergenerational village brings together the young and the young at heart as children and their elders learn and live alongside each other, cultivating meaningful connections that last a lifetime. Research shows that intergenerational engagement benefits the holistic health and well-being of participants of every age. Children gain valuable skills from their older mentors and feel supported by their uplifting friendships, while elders experience a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment by sharing their wisdom and experience with the next generation. Generations connect, communicate and collaborate, fostering empathy, respect and patience. By sharing our land and our lives, authentic intergenerational relationships flourish. Let our village inspire yours. We invite you to learn more about Echoes Montessori and our groundbreaking approach to intergenerational living
So that's a quick view of our intergenerational vertical village. And within the time that we have today, which as the other presenters have identified, it's really short. We are all so passionate. We could talk for hours at a time about what we do. But really briefly, we wanted to just take you through a few of the things that we see as our real strengths and successes within this, can't even really say project, within this community. There's a little comment that's just come up and said, this is like aged care for 4-year-olds. That was such an incredible program for really spreading awareness around intergenerational engagement, and we're so grateful to it. And there are so many parallels. What you'll see as we move through these is that one of the differences is that we're permanent. So unlike that project where it was visits happening between two separate environments that occurred for a finite period of time, we're here all the time, every day, in so many different ways. So if we could please go to the next slide. We started out with an incredibly positive co-design process. So this photograph shows Barbara alongside the then CEO of ECH, which is an ageing support services provider here in South Australia. David Panter was the CEO when we got involved. And the process to actually develop this intergenerational village was incredible. It was such a joyful process, which is not something you can often say about a building development, but it was genuinely fun and funny and engaging because we were able to get representatives from all the different domains of what was going to be happening within this village together as part of the process before pencil had ever been put to paper, before ground had been broken. So we had ourselves as the early childhood professionals. There were representatives from ECH giving their ageing support perspective, of course, children, residents, families, the children in our other early learning centres who could give us insights into what they would love to see. So it was an incredibly collaborative process. And what I feel like is that it was like ingredients being put together in a dish, so that now when you look at this village, you can't pick out, well, what's the education part and what's the aged care part and who came up with this and who came up with that. It is so seamlessly blended together. It's like taking a bite of a beautiful meal where you can't pick out each individual ingredient. You just have this amazing flavor that's so enriching. So it was an incredible process to be part of. If we could pop to the next slide, please. We're also incredibly lucky to be built on the foundation of permanence and pervasiveness. So because we are there all the time, this is not an excursion or an outing that we do occasionally. We are there within the village every single day, and we always will be. There's no one going anywhere. We'll always have our residents above. We'll always be in the classroom. It means that we have the capacity to be a true community, not just an activity or an occasion. We have the time and the place to be a community. And as was mentioned by one of the earlier speakers, that idea that space needs to precede community. To build a community, you need to first have the space created. And we're incredibly fortunate that that's what we have. So an example just in the middle there, one of the great spaces that really creates communal engagement in our intergenerational village is the workshop. There's a workshop downstairs where many of the residents, primarily men, but also a lot of the women, go to do their own bits and pieces. They have their tools stored, and our children know that if there's something that needs to be built or fixed or mended, they can take it down to the workshop and their grandfriends will be there to help them. And it's just incredible to allow our children to understand that process, to learn real skills from their elders, and for our grandfriends to really maintain that sense of purpose and giving back to their community and using skills that they've developed over their lives in such a purposeful way. If we could please pop forward. Another of our strengths is built upon that foundation of permanence and pervasiveness, because it allows us to have really, truly personalized participation. We don't have to come up with a predetermined program of, well, this is what we're going to do on this day. We'll do painting from this time till this time on a Thursday. We don't have to do that degree of preparation or teacher-led identification, because we've got participants who are there creating the program organically themselves as they work. So every one of the children and every one of the residents has the capacity and control to choose when, whether or not, how and why they participate in intergenerational engagement. So it really facilitates a sense of autonomy and self-direction. And it also means that there's a strengths-based focus, because we're not saying to our our grand friends, hey, you can only join in if you want to sing a song with the children or read a story. We're leaning into what makes them who they are and what makes them proud of themselves to incorporate that into our engagement. So in the photographs you can see here, we have Rob, one of the residents who, when he moved in, swore that there was no way he was ever going to get involved with those children. You know, he was not there to play with kids. That wasn't his thing. And that would have been fine. There was no pressure or requirement for him to do so. However, as time went on, and Rob would be often down in the workshop or up in the community hall working on his model trains, because while he doesn't really like children, he loves model trains. And it turns out that someone else who loves model trains, children. They were absolutely fascinated when they happened to walk past in one of these communal spaces and see what he was doing. And they had questions and he was delighted to answer. He suddenly had a captive audience for his passion, his hobby. So he was really engaged through that mutual interest. And Rob then went on to actually invite our children to design and build their own model track with him, which he then donated to the classroom. So there was this incredible capacity for him to contribute and be part of this intergenerational community, but on his own terms, in a way that really means something to him. If we can please move forward. We've also found strength through our partnerships. We have, Barb and I, a real attitude of just being completely open. So open-minded, open-hearted, opening our mouths as much as we can, you know, really speaking as much as possible and shouting from the rooftops, opening our doors to any visitors who want to come in and be part of it, and opening our emails, because so often there are just unexpected arrivals in our inbox for something that turns into an amazing collaboration. So through these sort of open-minded approaches, we've been able to not just have partnerships with ECH and Walter Brook the architects to design the environment, but then practitioners from all around Australia. We've been able to go to conferences and speak about what we're doing to be able to inspire others to participate in intergenerational engagement. We've had research partnerships with Torrens University. We've had Adelaide Uni, allied health practitioners come in as part of their final year research projects. We've found community links, and we've had politicians come in as well, which, as we all know, we want to bang the drums from that political perspective to try to help that funding flow through and that kind of infrastructure be built at the political level too. If we can move forward, please. We view ourselves now as pracademics. So we are practitioners, we're not researchers, we're not academics, but we have the practical hands-on experience that when we then partner with academics, we can contribute really meaningfully to the research landscape. So we strongly encourage any practitioners out there, don't be intimidated by the idea of research. If that's not your forte, find the people who do have that strength and partner with them so you can generate the output, because the researchers have the incredible technical skills to gather the data and analyze it, but the practitioners have the environments where that data is being generated. So get together as much as you can. Next slide, please. When we looked at the sort of itinerary for today and we were invited to talk about challenges and lessons learned, we were really happy that we could think of more strengths than challenges, but we still came up with a couple. So one of them is that there is risk in what we do. We're working with two vulnerable groups, and so yes, there's risk associated with it. And also that rotating rosters can have a really big impact on continuity. So if we move forward one slide, please. When we think about the risk, we try incredibly hard to have a risk-benefit mindset. So yes, we completely understand there are going to be risks involved in intergenerational engagement, but what we're looking for is the solution. We're looking for the corresponding protective factors that we can put into place, because the benefits absolutely outweigh those risks. So yes, it has sometimes been a challenge for us overcoming some of these risks, particularly with things like working with children checks. When you've got a 93-year-old who's lived in 4 different countries, it's a little bit challenging to help her through the online application for a working with children check, but there are always ways to overcome it. And I think for all practitioners, that's such an important message for us to remain focused on those solutions and not let the risks become barriers to inclusion. If we move forward one more, please. The other challenge that we do have to acknowledge is that when personnel move on, it can have a disruption. So even within a permanent and pervasive community like ours, which isn't as dependent on any single individual to facilitate it the way that potentially an excursion might be, there is still an impact when, in particular, leaders move on. We've been incredibly fortunate that within the early learning team, we haven't had a lot of transitions, but in the ECH team, some of the really key figures, including that CEO, David Panter, who was part of the design from the very beginning, have moved on. And that has had a really big impact on the team around the intergenerational village within that kind of middle generation. Because, of course, with intergenerational practice, it isn't just children and their elders. There are middle-aged adults in between that as well. So it's our middle generation where we've seen some change. And that is why it's been so powerful for us to have the kind of integrated village where the children and their grandfriends could keep the program running even if there were changes in that middle age group. And in particular, we also really focused on having very clear vision and values statements to guide us and to make sure that any new team members coming in understand the practices, understand the guiding principles before, during, or after them going on to do, you know, the amazing training that's offered around intergenerational practice. It says to them, this is our expectation, this is our moral compass here within our village, and that helps to keep things as consistent as possible, even when we do have those staffing changes. So I think we're now on to our last slide because I've tried so hard to stick within time, but we would absolutely love to talk more, to open our doors, to have an ongoing interaction with anyone who's interested. And again, we're learning too, so this is an exchange. So it would be absolutely lovely to hear from anybody who would like to learn more or visit. So our contact details are below. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara and Jessica. You have truly created an inspiring environment. And if I'm in Adelaide, I will be there to be able to come and view it, because there are so many lessons to learn. And you're right, you know, sharing what you found to help other people be able to create something probably not even up to what you've got, but it's very similar. It would be, you know, fantastic from that perspective. So thank you for sharing that. To close our line of speakers, we're pleased to welcome Po Lee from Hong Kong. She'll be sharing her perspective on creating intergenerational spaces and communities. And so I'll now hand it over to Po Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And next slide, please. Good morning. I'm honored to be part of this webinar and to share with you from Mighty Oak's perspective how we encourage schools in Hong Kong to invite elders into their classrooms to learn together with students during lesson time. Mighty Oaks advances active aging in Hong Kong through intergenerational practices. Transforming schools into intergenerational spaces is one example of this. Next slide, please. Next slide. What is our context? Many elders we serve are lonely, anxious, and feel marginalized. One unique factor to Hong Kong is emigration, leaving many elders at high risk of social isolation when their primary caregiver children emigrate. Their mental health declines, and sadly, these elders feel left behind. Next slide. I invite you today to see how Mighty Oaks motivates youth to bring community and companionship to the elderly, helping to overcome the loneliness and anxiety I referred to earlier. There are many strategies for addressing these issues. Creating schools as intergenerational spaces is our focus today. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, back to the old one. Mighty Oaks is the first intergenerational relationship building NGO in Hong Kong. Over the last 8 years, we have partnered with 139 elder facility partners and 81 schools all over Hong Kong with a wide range of programs. Next slide, please. One of these programs is A Schools, which I'm going to talk more about today. This is an example of intergenerational space creation. A stands for Anchor Community with Elders. Our dream is big, which is to establish regular collaboration between every elder facility and nearby school in Hong Kong. Here are some highlights. First, shared space. Most community spaces, as various speakers have highlighted earlier, are age segregated. Through the A Schools program, elders are invited into schools for intergenerational engagement. Second, relationships. We help to build relationships between elders and students on a personal level, but also between schools and elder facilities at an institutional level. Third, in curriculum. Elders join students in class during school hours. This is really quite unique. Next slide, please. Next slide. You can see from this slide the wide range of school subjects that elders are invited to jointly learn with students, from visual arts to physical education. Some elders we serve have never attended school. Some have dropped off their children and even their grandchildren at our partner school, but have never stepped inside the classroom. For them, it is such a treat to be invited into the classroom to attend regular class with students. Next slide, please. What is the role of elders in A Schools? Well, this really depends on the activity. For many, they are participants, whether in civic education or service learning classes as examples. Some progress to become co-creators, where their views are sought and incorporated into program design and implementation. And yet more progress to become instructors, teaching values and skills to students. Next slide, please. Connecting with kids at school, learning together, meeting their teachers and parents. All of this helps the elderly to feel more connected to our community. Students learn empathy, respect for the elderly, and valuable life lessons from the elders. Seeing benefits for their students, some A Schools initiate their own activities involving the elderly. Mighty Oaks is the catalyst, and our goal for the A Schools program is for schools and elderly centers to co-create their own intergenerational activities for the long term. Next slide. This close relationship between schools and elderly centers has a ripple effect. One example is the photo you see in the middle of this slide. This A School hosted an exhibition of the joint artwork of elders and students at their school fair and invited the elderly to become docents, to introduce their artwork and also to share how they have personally benefited from learning together with youth. Next slide. Well, we were invited to talk about challenges, and we have faced multiple challenges. Schools find it hard to carve out time during school hours to learn with elders. Many regard this as nice to have, not as a must-have, because of the intense focus on academic excellence from schools, parents, and teachers. So what do? We persuade schools to select non-exam subjects. The key to overcoming many of these challenges is having strong support from school management. Our solid track record also helps to build trust. A schools usually fund their own curriculum adjustment, and donors are keen to fund Mighty Oaks as this is a transformative program. Next slide. Please, can you play the video? Thank you.
我呢幾廿歲咧，見到啲小朋友，因為佢無憂無愁嘅，令到我哋都好開心。去到尾聲啦，有佢哋嘅刺激，我哋就會重新再起程啦。
Thank you. Did you catch what that? No, let's stop this. So, did you catch what that elderly man said? He said we are approaching the end of our learning journey, but with inspiration from the young, we can embark on a new journey. So this is my last slide. What is notable about A schools is that elders are invited into the classroom to learn with students as part of their school curriculum. Starting with kids when they're very young helps them to embark on a long learning journey with the elderly over many years, and each grade progresses with different projects involving the elderly, from STEM to recording life stories. Let me close by inviting you to join us for a symposium on intergenerational practices on 18th September in Hong Kong, with Professor Thang Ling Ling from Singapore as our keynote speaker. We will provide online access, and we look forward to seeing all of you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Polly, and it's so great to see the great work that Mighty Oaks is doing in Hong Kong. So many different opportunities, and yeah, just the joy that comes when, as you say, that those children are great motivators, aren't they, for things to happen. Anyway, we now have time for questions, comments, and reflections. So you're welcome to use the chat or the Q&A, or if you'd rather ask your question live, hopefully we can have the tech working. So please feel free to unmute yourself and turn your camera on, and we can have a look at what some questions are. So let me just go to the chat. And if there's anyone who's got any questions that they want to just ask live, I'm not sure, Xanthi, if that's possible, if the attendees can turn on their cameras and that. So what did we have? Are seniors paid to support the ECE work, or are they volunteers? I think that's from yours, Jess. Is that your...
Yes, I think that popped up while I was chatting.
Yeah.
So effectively, the residents who just want to pop in and out, or who participate, like Rob, building the model trains, primarily they are just volunteering their time. It's interesting because although it could be seen as kind of a voluntary role, that's an interesting way to kind of frame a relationship. As we said, it's a community, it's not an activity. We're not inviting or requiring these people to get involved. So really what they're doing is choosing to spend time with their friends. It's just that their friends happen to be 2 years old or 3 years old or 4 years old. So I don't think that many of our residents view it as a volunteer role in that way. They just see it as spending time with the children, spending time with their friends. That being said, I think it's also really important to distinguish that we're certainly not exploiting that as labour. So we pay our early childhood educators, and we have over the regulatory requirements for ratios, so that we've got a full and complete team of paid professionals providing education and care for the children. And the residents who get involved are certainly certainly not expected to participate in the kind of caregiving routines. They don't change nappies or do meals or any of those sorts of things. You know, our educators are writing observations of children, taking photographs, and certainly there's absolutely no degree of our residents participating in those sorts of tasks. So it's just literally they're having a wonderful time with their young friends, and therefore it's not in a paid capacity.
So they're really just participants, aren't they? They're participants in what's
absolutely.
happening. Yeah. So they're and it's all choice and then that. So yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely sounds fantastic. So what's next? Amend shed
Cameron,
our local
Karen.
makes yes, Polly.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'd like to ask a question of Marlene. Marlene, you talked earlier about the ageism scale, which is a tool that is coming out and you're encouraging all of us to use it. Personally, I'm very excited about this. Can you share whether this will be in different languages or is it in English only?
Thank you for the question, Polly. I like you, I'm also very excited. It has been translated into multiple languages because the testing has occurred in various places from Moldova to Lebanon to Libya to Colombia. So it certainly is available in those languages, but it's still very early days, and the intention is to make it available in other languages as soon as we possibly can. I'm not sure the extent to which it's available in Mandarin or other Asian languages at this stage, but I can certainly tell you it's on the agenda.
Thank you, Marlene. Honkai, you had a question about safeguarding versus safety. Did you want to ask that live rather than me try and interpret your chat message? If you're still there.
Yes, it's just a general question. I don't have any. It's exactly what I've phrased.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that's okay. I think that's possibly it. Has anybody else got any questions? Any other presenters got questions for other presenters or for anyone else? Or it was all, sometimes it's hard to take everything in that everyone's just said, but we're also, so on the same page, I think, in different ways. And from the different country perspectives, it's interesting to hear that. Polly, did you have a question again?
I have a comment or an invitation because one of the schools we collaborate with is online this morning. Lindsay, are you online? I wonder whether you can unprompted say something about how it's benefited your school. Lindsay, are you still online? Sorry, she's probably rung off, but she was online earlier.
No, that's
Lindsay,
okay.
Yes. Lindsay, your turn, please. Switch on your camera and your mic.
I'm not sure if they can. Xanthi, can they switch, or the attendees switch on their...
Oh, she can't. Can you switch it on for her, Xanthi?
Sorry, just trying to see. It doesn't look like I can from the settings, so...
Never mind. But Lindsay, thank you for attending.
So if you are unfortunately an attendee and do have any questions, you will have to put it in the chat or the Q&A. So we'll wait a few more minutes just to see if there's any other questions that are likely to come through.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For all of the panelists, I'm really interested. I just think it's so wonderful to hear from all of you speakers from different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences. I'd really love to hear some ideas on how we can create more collaborations in terms of Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities across different cultures. How can we learn together and work together to really, increase and grow intergenerational connections? Anyone want to jump in on that one?
I think I'll speak actually from Animo and myself back sitting here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Like, we're always open and willing to share. If anyone is keen to connect with us, then we're most welcome to hop online and actually share what we're learning. And actually, one of the things I did want to talk about was just that comment about safety versus safeguarding. And I've emailed that to myself because in our co-design piece that we've been working on here, that has been one of the big issues that has come up for
the older parents, the older people who would actually want to live a week, looking to live in there, but also the parents of the children. So I'm really interested in, what does safety look like when you are creating an intergenerational learning centre? That's something that we don't have the answer for at the moment, but actually thanks to this forum, I've got some more material that we can look to utilise. So thank you. But we're always at open door policy at Vision West. So looking forward to continue to connect with this group once this is finished.
Thank
Xanthi,
you.
can I? Oh, Lindsay, you're on.
I'm on, Polly.
Yeah, do you want to share? Do you want to share something?
We also have one of our students here, Elaine, but she's just new and starting out working with Polly's organization. But thank you guys for including us today, and thank you for all the great sharing that everyone's given. I don't know who was just sharing, Mrs. Jacobs, Raywin.
Yeah.
I think you were just sharing about some of the safety concerns. Was that your question that you were asking, or protocol? And we're really just new starting out working with, well, I shouldn't say new. Mighty Oaks has been working with our high school age children, but we're new extending into across primary through secondary school. So I appreciate your comment about security or in safety, because I do think on both sides, there's some games that we've been playing with balloons and very active, where from the school side, I'm thinking, oh goodness, I know what 9-year-olds act like. And if they're suddenly throwing balloons with elderly and not aware of some of the physical constraints. I'd love to stay connected in terms of thinking how, as schools work with elder homes and elderly, how we work on that. I think this has been particularly helpful, and I was just writing into the comments, Polly, since you asked me to share, just thinking about also the benefits to the young people, because for us in an international school setting, so many of our kids don't get to spend a lot of time with people older than their parents or their school teachers, and they don't know what that looks like necessarily on a regular basis. So it's great in that our kids are getting exposure to grandparents' age that they wouldn't normally have. I also think for us in an international school setting, I think it adds value and purpose, hopefully, for the elderly when they're working with our students, that a lot of our elderly speak Cantonese and English, and our students don't necessarily speak Cantonese. So our students are actually truly learning from the elderly, because they're learning about Hong Kong and the history of Hong Kong. They're learning about Cantonese. They're seeing a side of Hong Kong that they would not see from their international school teachers or just their immediate community. So thank you for letting me share. I'll just stop with that, but I appreciate all of you guys who are thinking about creating these connections.
Thank you so much for that, Lindsay. And it's great to have someone who's actually doing one of the programs here to be able to share that information as well. So thanks you. I don't think there's any other questions. We'll give it a few more minutes. Yes, Polly, go.
Can I comment on the question that Xanthi posed to us?
Yes,
which
absolutely.
is, how can we continue these connections? And one of the other organizations I'm involved in, and they focus on active aging, they actually have a newsletter contributed by members of the community every 2 months. So it doesn't have to be as frequent as that, because other than these 4 examples today, or 6 examples with WHO and the Churchill Fellow, there are so many other rich examples all over Asia. It would be great to actually get contributors to a newsletter once a quarter, once in 2 years, whatever works, because then you can get this community flowing throughout the year.
Yeah, I think you're right, isn't it? Like the Global Week is a good start, but it is a week, and we have a lot of other weeks in the year as well. And so it's how do we keep that momentum going, especially in this age of, in our region sort of thing as well. Now, people have got their hands up, and they went on my screen, so I've just forwarded through. So is it LaBush? Do you have your hands up? Would you like to share or ask a question?
Yes. I wanted to ask people who contributed, so Jessica and Paul, about working with children and elderly people. Do you have some ideas and suggestions how to get started? Say, like I work mostly with older people, and attempting to create a group that would look at intergenerational co-housing as a project. But I think for me, it would be really beneficial to start with some kind of scheme working with kids so that the group can become more cohesive. So I know that you already have established community, and buildings and spaces, but how would you think you could start without it?
Look, I think for us, we actually did start without it because our initial kind of toe in the water, our first steps of getting into intergenerational practice happened with us just being early childhood educators with a regular preschool class, and then reaching out to local aged care facilities in our area. So, literally getting onto Google Maps and looking at who is physically close to us, and then getting on the phone or getting into the inbox and emailing people saying, hey, do you have any interest in this? So it really did start small for us, and then it grew from there, because as you've pointed out, Labosh, once you have that experience and that community, it becomes much easier to build on it. So I would recommend really just looking at your local community and trying to see if you're in aged care currently, if there are some preschools or schools nearby who might get involved. Often it is about people just almost waiting to be asked. It's surprising the number of people out there who have heard a little bit about intergenerational practice. Maybe they've seen a documentary, maybe they have, heard about a school, but they don't necessarily know enough to do it themselves. They're not quite ready in their journey to take it upon their own shoulders. But if you ring them up and say, hey, I'd like to help make this happen, suddenly it doesn't seem like such a big challenge for them. It's not such a big task because you can do it together.
That's great. No, thank you, because I had the impression that it was in the same building for you, but it's not. Okay.
So the one at Echoes Montessori is, so we now have that integrated village, but we also have other early learning centres that started out with visits. So we didn't go from just working with children to suddenly having this village. We had those steps in between. So, your first step might be just a one-off visit, and that might turn into an intergenerational village for you too.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Can I just add to that really quickly with my croaky voice? I would just like to say, don't be scared of trying. We all talk about intergenerational programs as programs, and yes, some of them are, and some of them are really wonderful. But the first step is actually just putting people together. And so if you are a bit nervous about bringing up, a program, just talk about getting people together. Just find ways of visiting each other, because that is an intergenerational connection that you've already done. So don't be afraid of starting small and then aiming for bigger as you go.
Yeah, Can I follow up with something Barbara said? Connecting people together. And of course, we focus on spaces, which are important. And earlier on, you heard from Savannah and others, where you have purpose-built spaces. That is almost the gold standard, right? But at Mighty Oaks, we work with what is in the community. And in our community and in your communities, there's always going to be lots of schools of all different types of learning institutions, as well as elder facilities, whether care homes or others. So at Mighty Oaks, we see our role as connecting people and institutions that already pre-exist in our community. So that also is a community without building anything.
Thank you, Polly. And I'm very wary of the time, and we've already gone over, which I knew we would. And we could talk about this, as you say, all of us are so passionate. We could talk about it for hours, but we don't have hours, and it's the weekend, and everyone, I'm sure, has other things to do. So I'd just like to finish off with saying a big thank you to everyone who attended today and your participation in this little discussion at the end. And a special thanks really to all our speakers who have shared their valuable insights in this really broad subject, but one that we're, as I said, all so passionate about. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Generations Working Together and the executive team who work really hard to make Global Intergenerational Week possible. And we hope that this webinar has left you with some new ideas and an inspiration on creating intergenerational spaces and communities. Don't forget to please reach out to your local country organisations, AIIP in Australia, GenLab Collective in Singapore, Mighty Oaks in Hong Kong, and myself at Generations Connect in New Zealand. We're here to support whatever you may are currently doing or may want to start. And, you know, don't forget to check out the other webinars that are happening around the globe over this week as well, even though sometimes the time difference might be a bit tricky. All of them are, I'm pretty sure, being recorded, and so will be shared at a later date that you'll be able to catch up on what's been happening. But all I can say is thank you once again for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at any other webinars we have in the future relating to just getting together and keeping these conversations going, not just on the week, but you know, also looking forward to what happens for next year as well. So thanks for that, everyone, and have a great day.